We all dream of holidays, to relax or explore other parts of the world. Yet tourism takes a toll on nature, cities, and the climate. Is it time to rethink our travel plans?
We need structural change and a totally different approach.
Before Corona struck, cities like Dubrovnik, Venice, and Barcelona were inundated with tourists, leaving visitors frustrated and locals stressed. But change is afoot.
We want quality tourism which makes people fall in love with Venice.
They fall in love under the gaze of Big Brother. Many towns are now using CCTV on a wide scale, and we ourselves provide a vast amount of data.
We try to turn big data into smart data simply by networking data.
Algorithms identify our needs, and agencies provide the appropriate offers. Yes, we're already airborne again, but can we still travel without feeling guilty? Las Ramblas, Barcelona's famous pedestrian boulevard, and before Corona, a tourist hotspot. Locals felt they were being drowned out by the tourist hordes. Antonia Folguera wants to give residents a voice through a new public radio station.
I live here and enjoy getting to know my neighbours. It's often said that we city dwellers don't even know who lives next door. But I know lots of people in my neighbourhood. Hi Edward, it's Antonia.
What does the future hold for a city that attracted 21 million visitors in 2019? That's 13 tourists for every one resident. It's hard to imagine there was any room on the Ramblas for locals.
But that's not true. Some people still live here, and you're going to meet one of them. He's called Edward. Hi Edward, how's things?
Hi, is it the Japanese greeting today?
Yes, Japanese.
Eduard Elias Villa is a member of the SOS Ramblas Association. He's fighting to prevent the complete sellout of the boulevard. During the pandemic, he took part in an unusual project. He rang each doorbell on the 1.2-kilometre avenue to find out who still lives there. The result was shocking. Officially, 700 people reside here, but the association found no more than 70.
Our guest today is a resident of the Ramblas. They say no one lives here anymore, but we have living proof that's not true. Right, Edward?
I'm one of the last resistance fighters.
You are. What was it like here last year when there were hardly any tourists on the Ramblas?
What came to light was something we've complained about for years. With the massive visitors gone, it suddenly became clear how big the difference is between life with and without tourists. Now, everyone can see that.
It became dramatically obvious that in districts which live solely from tourism, it's not just neighbours that are missing. You can't find a single bakery, pharmacy or grocery store either.
In my view, the tourist industry is extremely destructive. Tourism can ruin a place and make it worthless. And then? The industry just looks for the next place. And what's left when the tourists have gone? A corpse.
Many of the small shops that border Las Ramblas still haven't come back to life. With only a few tourists around, it's not worth opening. And some businesses didn't survive the lockdown. Lots of apartments in the area are also empty. Most served as holiday accommodation, now relics of the past. Years ago, Barcelonans launched protests at the growing number of vacation apartments. Living space had grown scarce and many could no longer afford the rising rents in their neighbourhoods. tourists go home, was their response. The mayor took their concerns seriously.
We have since identified 7,200 illegal tourist apartments. We have achieved what seemed impossible. Airbnb and other platforms have removed thousands of illegal accommodations from their websites. Adverts which had fueled property speculation and caused resentment amongst residents. We have also regulated new hotel construction. Hotel construction is actually banned in the city center because there's already enough.
With space in the city centre limited, Barcelona has been spreading out into surrounding areas, like Poblenou, a former industrial and working-class neighbourhood. Its transformation began 2 decades ago, with the opening of a university and new housing projects. The city is wooing companies to create more jobs here. And Barcelona opened its design museum next to Poblenou's landmark Torre Glorias skyscraper in 2014. But what about tourists?
We don't want to create a cultural scene specifically for tourists. We want tourists to take an interest in what interests the people of Barcelona. That's our goal. So we have to create a scene for residents, and this will automatically make tourists interested.
Poblenou is just 20 minutes from the city centre. Barcelona is applying the smart city concept to its development. The area around the design museum is now home to attractive living space. Once known as the Catalan Manchester, Poblenou is betting that innovative architecture and culture will please residents and visitors alike.
We have to broaden our tourist horizon and diversity and decentralize the streams of tourism. We need to make funds available and develop new tourism fields, like culture, sport, and ecology. Then we can change tourism.
Ernst Cañada is also curious about tourism's influence on towns and cities. A third-generation Poblenou resident, his grandmother worked as a seamstress in a factory here. Though he likes culture, he fears that the changes are stripping Poblenou of its charm.
When I was small, this was an industrial area, not a magnet for tourists. If you saw a stranger with a briefcase, you knew he was lost. The idea of decentralizing tourism simply means spreading the problems to the rest of the city.
I disagree. Decentralization means diverting streams of tourists so that there are fewer tourists per area. If Barcelona people visit fashion workshops in Poblenou, tourists will follow suit. If they don't, then neither will tourists, and that's the issue. How can I, as a resident, influence decisions taken by visitors to my city? That's the key.
Tourists currently are focused on just 30% of Barcelona's total area, and millions are always drawn to the same sites. Poblenou has its own Rambla. Locals are worried that soon their boulevard too will be full of tourists elbowing them out. But wouldn't visitors bring money into the neighbourhood?
The growth in tourism in recent years has not led to an improvement in living conditions here. Tourist industry jobs are insecure with very low wages and poor working conditions, a lot of outsourcing and part-time contracts. For the majority of local residents, tourism only has negative aspects.
Like Barcelona, many international tourist hotspots face a dilemma. How can they fulfill the needs of residents while being economically dependent on tourism?
It would be great to see the Ramblas again become a boulevard for residents. Naturally, visitors should also be welcome here, but not thousands of them at once.
no cal que vinguin milers de persones, poden venir més espaiades.
We all believe that the problem is the masses. That's why we're against more tourists. It would help us if in the future there were no more or at least far fewer cheap flights. Otherwise, the problem will persist.
The total number of flights worldwide rose to 47 million in 2019, or 1.5 billion vacationers. Nothing, it seemed, could stop them. But then came COVID-19 and lockdowns, a time devoid of any good news. Well, not quite. At the New Climate Institute in Cologne, Professor Niklas Höhner evaluates global studies on climate change.
Since tourism's taken a break, air traffic emissions have dropped significantly. That's good for the climate. But once the pandemic's over, we expect folks will start flying again, maybe even more than before.
No-frills carriers are already attracting passengers with bargain offers. Barcelona for €12.99, Paris to Venice for a mere €14.99. Price dumping has taken up where it left off. How? Kerosene remains tax-free.
We can't imagine tax-free driving. Railroads too pay tax, but air traffic doesn't. It's effectively subsidized. That is actually counterproductive and by rights should be stopped immediately.
For years now, the European Union's attempts to change kerosene laws have failed because the member states cannot agree. But the pace of climate change is making the issue more and more urgent.
Consequently, we have to come up with alternatives. And one possible solution is synthetic fuel. Electricity is obtained from renewable energies and used to produce a liquid fuel which can be burnt quite normally in turbines.
Renewable fuels are technically feasible, but still too expensive. So compared to bus or rail travel, for instance, flying still generates high emissions. A long-haul flight produces around 3 tons of CO2 per passenger.
The carbon dioxide emissions from cruise ships are also extremely high, approximately 3 tons per week, about the same as a car in a year.
Before Corona, up to 10 cruise ships sailed into Venice each day, and up to 20,000 tourists went ashore. Not only do these giant vessels emit vast quantities of pollutants, their wakes also damage the foundations of local buildings, most of which are built on wooden piles. Companies still use Venice as the highlight of their cruises, sailing past St. Mark's Square at daybreak. It's like something out of a fairy tale. But Venice itself doesn't profit much from this kind of tourism. The docking fees go to Rome, and the passengers eat and sleep on board. And some tour operators report their earnings in tax havens like Panama. But Venice's head of tourism is still glad to see visitors returning.
At last, there's life in the city again. After a difficult year, people here can again lead normal lives, and many of them have been hard hit.
Before the pandemic, Venice was overrun with tourists, 30 million each year. Many were day trippers, all with the same agenda. See St. Mark's Square, ride in a gondola, cross the Rialto Bridge, buy a souvenir, and then leave in the evening.
During lockdown, Venice set up an operations center linked to hundreds of cameras and sensors all over the city. As a result, we now know how many people are coming and going every minute.
The data is evaluated in a smart control room. The city plans to use its observations to guide the masses of visitors and stagger the number of tourists at hotspots. On the day of our visit, 20,000 tourists were in the city, 40% German. Information from phone companies is used to determine nationality. Since nearly everyone has a cell phone, the phone number can be identified on arrival.
This makes Venice one of the safest cities in the world.
Although somebody might be watching, free hotspots enable us to quickly find something on a smartphone when we're abroad. Berlin network activist Markus Beckedahl worries about the digital traces we leave. He monitors the security of private data on the internet.
Big data refers to the vast amount of data that can be sifted through, classified, and used to draw conclusions. And that is interesting for each individual sector. Big data is changing tourism insofar as totally new possibilities are emerging, completely new scenarios, but also totally new risks we talk very little about.
When we view a website, often we simply accept the long data protection declaration without reading it. This makes us easy to track for algorithms that are becoming better and better acquainted with our behaviour and our holiday wishes.
The tourist of today is transparent because, as a rule, we do all our bookings via the internet. This enables a large number of companies to gather information on us and draw conclusions as to our preferences and our personality, usually with the aim of presenting us with even more personalized advertising. Werbung anzeigen und vermitteln zu können.
Companies like Facebook, Google and Instagram analyse our data according to target groups and sell the information to tourism marketing agencies like St. Elmo's. The company devises advertising strategies for entire holiday regions. Olaf Nitz creates targeted campaigns from big data.
Basically, you can buy users to market to. You could get a batch of 1,000 users, say for 10 cents each, to show them banners. The price rises depending on the target group. But there are also other billing models, pay per click. You might also pay 10 cents for that, or, depending on who you want to address, or the value the click generates, you might pay 2 or 3 euros.
The algorithm is even running while we Google, calculating what we're interested in and selling a tailor-made advert on the page we're about to look at to the highest bidder.
The closer the user is to a transaction, the more expensive it gets. If I know, for instance, that a user is looking for a 4-star hotel, a click is more expensive because the likelihood of the user completing the booking based on the advert is higher, and the price he or she is prepared to pay is also higher.
Internet giants earn a lot of money even before our holiday begins. But what about while we're on holiday, when we're looking for a restaurant with a good rating?
The problem with these evaluation systems is that we can no longer trust them, because either rivals go and rate their competitors worse than they are, or they buy positive ratings, or they get friends and acquaintances to give good ratings. But on no account are these evaluations conclusive.
And how protected is the data gathered on us in a city like Venice?
It's probably claimed that the data are obtained in a pseudonymized or anonymized form.
The data are anonymous. We know which country someone's telephone number comes from, but we don't know the name of the person. That would contravene data protection laws.
The problem is that in conjunction with other data that could be available, it is possible, from a large pseudonymized or anonymized dataset, to de-anonymize certain items of information.
We often help make ourselves more transparent, especially while on vacation, for example by taking a photo and revealing its location.
The problem with location data is that when a company or the state knows where I was in the past, and also where all other people were, statistical conclusions can be drawn as to where I might be tomorrow, even though I might not even have thought about it. A computer can already pre-calculate that with a high level of probability, and then make me corresponding offers.
The only alternative is to leave our cell phones at home, but most of us prefer to pay for the convenience with our data worldwide. Dubrovnik also installed surveillance cameras during lockdown in its old town. Now current tourist numbers show up on this website.
We've changed our tourism management completely. Tourism used to swamp us. Now we manage it.
Up to 15,000 people would sometimes throng into the old town before the pandemic. Not only did this cause overcrowding, it was also dangerous, because in the event of a mass panic, the medieval city wall has just 4 exits. And cruise ship tourists who brought in little revenue all used to arrive at the same time and stay for just a few hours. So the mayor introduced new rules.
First rule, no more than 2 cruise ships in port at once. Second rule, each ship must stay berthed for at least 8 hours. The third rule applies to day tourists, most of whom arrive by coach. Each coach, and we're talking about 150 a day, now has to register on a website and is given a special slot. And coaches are limited to 7 every half hour.
This allows Dubrovnik to stagger arrivals and the crush at the city gates. Tourism here is only slowly picking up again. Life in the old town is still more relaxed and idyllic than it has been for a long time.
We really have been able to reduce the number of simultaneous visits to the historic center. We now know all about the number of people arriving at the city gates. But as I've always said, it's not about numbers, it's about flow.
It's not about the number, it's about flow.
Steering streams of visitors while meeting tourists' needs. Like many hotspots, Dubrovnik faces a logistical challenge every day. And its inhabitants must cope with the consequences of tourism. The old town now has less than 1,000 residents. 20 years ago, it had 5 times as many. How can the remaining residents benefit from their own town? Sociologist Petra Marchenko is conducting research.
We have to know exactly what we want from this town. Do we want it to become an urban centre again? Or should it remain a kind of open-air museum? Because the moment a person's living space is treated as a resource, conflicts arise.
Is it legitimate for a city to profit at the expense of its residents? Dubrovnik gained in popularity by serving as a backdrop for Star Wars and Game of Thrones. But can it escape these fantasies?
There are many obstacles to revitalising our historic core. The first is that there are no apartments available. so there is nowhere for the people to come back to. It's really hard for young people in particular to find property because prices have now soared beyond all buying power.
With visitors absent during the pandemic, many young people also lost their jobs. Yet another reason to move. Only older residents are still holding out. Now the city is bracing for more tourists. But are they really welcome?
Every tourist is welcome here. But we want every visitor who comes to Dubrovnik to respect our town.
Poštuje mjesto u koje je došao. Dakle, respect the city. Eto.
Barcelona's residents would also like to see visitors respect their city. Tourist stunts like this have long sparked outrage. Now such escapades are to become a thing of the past.
It makes me sad to see tourists coming here and doing things they would never do at home. It really depresses me. I would like to see people show a greater sense of responsibility. When someone travels somewhere, they should behave as if they were visiting their parents and not misbehave.
Whether residents and tourists will get on together in Europe's hotspots also depends on future urban planning. Barcelona is working on a new mobility concept. The aim is to ban more and more cars from the city centre. Barcelona already has 250 kilometres of bike lanes. Shared bicycles and e-bikes are available on every street corner. The first 30 minutes are free, but they're only available to locals. Green hubs and squares are transforming once busy intersections into what's known as superblocks. 5 of these oases have been set up already, and 10 times as many are planned. The aim is for them to replace 60% of the roads still used by motorists and create space for social interaction. Even in tourist districts like El Born, citizens' initiatives are creating small gardens, which promote a sense of community and neighbourhood. Barcelona is carving out a new form of urbanity and focusing on its strengths.
Culturally, Barcelona has a lot to offer. We've got great people, outstanding museums, and excellent artists. If visitors are to come here all year round and not just in summer, we have to focus on culture. We want people to take an interest in culture and come into contact with us locals.
Many European hotspots want to draw visitors' attention to nearby attractions too. In Barcelona, that's Montserrat Abbey. Amsterdam hypes the beach at Zandvoort, just 35 kilometres away. It's even been renamed Amsterdam Beach for now. And even Copenhagen is placing its faith in decentralization. But Barcelona is also pursuing another strategy, integrating visitors into everyday life so that, at best, they're indistinguishable from the locals. While working on a study at the Future Institute in Vienna, sociologist Christiane Wager identified one need every visitor has. Resonance tourism is the future.
In physics, resonance simply means being in harmony with something or reverberating with it. Applied to tourism, this means a shift from the mass phenomenon of ticking off a list of sites to a major need for resonance. In other words, for localization in a specific area.
The tourist is being perceived and addressed differently. The aim is to link people with one another again, to stop a distinction being made between tourist and local. Ideally, it's an encounter at a location between people who enjoy being together.
50 years ago, holidays played a different role. people wanted rest and relaxation, preferably to do nothing to be fit for work again afterwards. Travelling was separate from everyday life.
That has now changed. We're now in a mobility phase, and an age when being on the move is becoming more and more the norm, especially where the younger generation is concerned. The boundaries between holidays and work, between leisure time and work, are now fading more and more.
Tourists no longer want to be recognised as such. They want to be part of this community. As a result, new products and constellations are being developed with regard to leisure, the combination of business and leisure. Suddenly, the visitor is no longer a mere 2 days somewhere before travelling on. Nowadays, he or she spends more time in one place.
First the beach, then the laptop. The pleasure tourist combines work and pleasure, like here in Beta House. Back in 2013, Jordi Subiras opened one of the first co-working offices in Barcelona. Desks and conference rooms can be rented on an hourly or a daily basis. It's a trend French hotel chain Accor and a property investor now hope to profit from on a large scale. They've opened flexible workrooms, not only in the popular suburb of Poblenou. They want to become market leader and aim soon to offer 1,200 of these offices all over Europe.
I think that co-working locations planned by hotel chains, as in the case of the Wojo concern, are probably being opened because hotels are seeking a strategy for acquiring and binding new customers. The aim is for their guests not just to stay overnight once or twice, but to stay longer.
It's also an attempt to counter Airbnb, a platform which for years has been luring customers away from hotels on a grand scale. This chart shows Airbnbs in Barcelona since the company was founded in 2008. Each dot represents a host. It's no different in Amsterdam. Or New York or Berlin. Airbnb has revolutionized the global tourist industry. The company went public and celebrated its billionth customer in 2021. Despite new laws, Airbnb is still partly responsible for the housing shortage in major cities. Yet its basic concept meets many tourists' need for genuine contact at a time in which travel is increasingly hectic.
It will become more a case of as well as rather than either or. Depending on my needs or the phase of life I'm in, I might want to get from A to B fast. But I might make a conscious decision to travel slowly. Slow travel, like slow food and slow fashion, as a counterpoint to being rushed.
Space and room is also the new luxury, and exclusivity is reflected in the price because space costs money. And so attractive space with fewer people also means higher prices.
It's not only more space that holidaymakers want. Many now also want to travel sustainably. 25 years ago, this gave Kai Pardon an idea, and he founded Reisen mit Sinnen, or travelling with purpose. His team tests every trip, but what is sustainable travel?
All flights are carbon dioxide compensated 100%, but also by people avoiding plastic as much as possible at their location, or getting around by bike or on foot, and not integrating any short-haul flights into their holiday.
His agency offers encounters on equal terms. On trips to Vietnam, tourists cycle from place to place like the locals, or get to know the hill communities on foot.
When we are out and about with our guests, we try to establish actual contacts so that true communication takes place. It's important for us, for as much added value as possible, to remain in the country. In our case, the figure is on average 51%. But the figure for an all-inclusive hotel, for example, is only a fraction of that. And the higher the added value, the more sustainable a product is.
Yet during the pandemic, it wasn't sustainable companies that received government support. It was the industry's giants, like TUI, the world's biggest travel company, and Lufthansa, with no environmental conditions attached.
The money could have been diverted in the right direction and spent solely on things that are really good for society. Conditions could have been attached to the money that is flowing into the airlines to make them commit long-term to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions.
Damit sie sich eben langfristig dazu verpflichten, ihre Treibhausgasemissionen zu reduzieren.
But Lufthansa offers exactly the opposite, rewarding its customers with a bonus program, even for short-haul flights, and also for many takeoffs and landings. Air France also received government support, but it had to commit to reducing its CO2 emissions by 50% by 2024. And in the case of domestic flights, by offering rail travel as an alternative wherever possible. The tiny island state of Palau also wants tourists to act more consciously. A film shown to every visitor immediately upon arrival underlines why. In the high season, this diving paradise in the Pacific Ocean has 5 times more visitors than local inhabitants. Tourists are shown how much damage their behaviour can cause to the sensitive coral reefs. But at the same time, Palau's economy needs visitors. On arrival, a pledge is stamped into every holidaymaker's passport. Signing it is a written commitment to respect nature in Palau. This might only be a symbolic act, but it is a step towards making people aware of the ecological damage tourism is causing worldwide. The citizens of Venice know all about the damage caused by cruise ships. They even feel it personally.
Before COVID, 10 ships arrived every day. As a result, by February, we had already exceeded the yearly air pollution limits set by the European Union.
If you hang out laundry and a ship arrives, you've quickly got to bring it in again because of the dirt that's in the air. In the suburb where I live, you can hardly breathe when a ship comes in.
But it looks as if cruise tourism here is going to pick up precisely where it left off before the pandemic. No giant cruise ships in Venice. For years, activists on and along the Giudecca Canal have repeatedly demonstrated against the giant cruise liners. Most of the ships burn heavy fuel oil, which releases 100 times more pollutants into the air than the ordinary diesel fuel used by trucks. But the number of bookings is soaring once again. Over the next few years, the industry expects the number of cruise ship passengers to rise from 30 to 40 million a year. 40 new cruise liners are to be added to the world's fleets by 2027. For the first time, advocates of cruise tourism are also protesting. Many lost their jobs during the pandemic and are glad to see that things are finally picking up again.
Il turismo crocieristico è un turismo buono.
Cruise tourism is good tourism, especially if Venice is the home port. because it means that ships stay longer. It guarantees income for the city, for hotels, taxi drivers, and through flights to Venice, in many ways.
A few weeks after the protest, the activists chalked up a minor success. Now, only cruise ships weighing less than 25,000 tons can sail past St. Mark's Square. Giant ships like this now have to moor at the industrial port, though they can still cause damage to the Venetian lagoon. Nevertheless, travel remains one of the world's most lucrative industries. In 2019, inbound tourism brought in about $1.45 trillion in revenue. What must change if cities and regions are to promote sustainable tourism?
The large international companies that avoid democratic controls and promote harmful mass tourism ought to be banned. This global system has to change.
Politicians must set the framework and create incentives for sustainable and climate-neutral travel.
If we want to fly, the industry needs to develop new technologies so that we can keep flying, but CO2 neutral.
And what can we do? Instead of jetting off to exotic locations, we can explore regions closer to home and linger a while rather than just ticking off items on our bucket lists. We can travel less often, but for longer. We could carefully weigh up every trip and make more conscious decisions about how we travel. Perhaps avoiding environmentally damaging trips until innovative solutions emerge. Or we could opt to discover everything possible, irrespective of the cost. How we want to travel in the future depends on how we want to live in the future.